Moving now to item 3 on our list, we have the application for a barn at Silver Street, Reeth. And this is Mr. Andrew Bishop, our planning officer, is going to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. First, though, it has been reported in the late comments that the Reeth, Fremantle and Heelaw Parish Council have sent their comments, which are that they have no objections. Also, it was also reported in the late comments that the applicant has submitted the results of a speed survey. The Highway Authority has been reconsulted and has responded. On the basis of the speed survey results provided by the applicant, they require a minimum sightline distance of 90 metres from the barn. As the proposed access is 61 metres from the barn, and the 90 metres cannot be achieved, the Highway Authority are still recommending refusal on highway safety grounds. This is therefore another reason for officers' recommendation of refusal. The application relates to a small traditional stone barn situated within the Swaledale and Arkengarthdale Barns and Walls Conservation Area, situated beside the B6270 road between Reeth and Heelaw. The application site extends for a length of 86 metres alongside the road in order to include the land required for the creation of a new highway access, an embankment to support a new access track, a car park and turning area, the siting of a packaged treatment plant, an air source heat pump and tree planting. The barn stands some 400 metres west of Reeth Community Primary School and 600 metres from Reeth itself, and I've just pointed the barn out for your and it's this one here. If you can see my arrow, it's at the far left-hand side of the screen, and this is Reeth and the school at the top. The land in front of the barn falls steeply away to the River Swale, which is in the bottom of here, and you can see lines going across these fields, which are the lynchets, the historic lynchets. This is the beg your pardon. This is the application site at the moment. You can see the barn on the left, and the land to the right of it is included because that is all within the application site to reach a new access point in approximately here. This is the application site. You can see the barn itself. You can see a footpath leading from it to a new created access and a car parking area at the end of that access. And this access would go to a new highway point created through the wall, and it would all be set up on an embankment. And you can see that it extends out into the field. The conversion of the barn itself depends on that access point. I'm sorry, Chairman. It depends on the creation of this access point. The works to the barn itself would form a 1-bedroom, 2-storey dwelling, and there would be changes to its appearance in that this right-hand door would be lowered in height to ground level. I'm sorry, this is my fingers losing control. And we can see a new window light and a flue being added. This is a cross-section through the embankment and the access track, which would be created within the field. I'm sorry, it's very sensitive. Which would be created within the field. And this is some distance from the actual point of the access itself. And you can see there would still be ground to make up to reach the level of the road, as indicated by the steepness of the verge. So this cross-section does not show the full impact of what the embankment and the access creation would be. This is the view of the barn on the road. This is the view in the field, and you can see the land falling away towards the photographer. And, sorry. This is the western elevation, and again you can see the fields to the right are falling away steeply from the road. This is the inside of the barn, and you can see it is in good state of repair. It has been repaired since 2011 with grant monies, and you can see that it's a completely new roof. Walling's been repaired, and there's new timbers, including those to doors and hatches. This is, in the foreground, the existing field access. And you can see it would have very poor visibility to the west. From a point 2 meters back, you would not see oncoming traffic. And this road is a 60-mile-per-hour national speed limit road. This is a view from the barn looking east towards Reeth. And you can see that same gateway on the left-hand side. And the car parking area would be formed where that field wall, dividing field wall is, and then extend away from the viewer towards the new created access. And it would be on top of the embankment. This illustrates an existing access in the adjoining field, and you can see how the ground in front, within the field, is quite steep, very steep. So these existing accesses cannot be used safely. So this is a view looking from the Reeth direction towards a barn, which you can see in the middle of the picture, standing by the road. And you can see the difference in the level between the road itself and the field, which falls away, and the embankment would come along from that dividing field wall towards the viewer, and then go through a new access approximately where the arrow is pointing. So it would be clearly seen by people going along that road. This is a view from the minor road on the south side of Swaledale. I'll point out the barn, which is this one here, and from it there be a footpath to a new created car parking area here where the arrow is. Then the embankment would extend to a point approximately here, 60 meters from the barn itself, and it would incline upwards to reach the road level. A proposal to convert a traditional building to a new use must satisfy the requirements of all three policies L1, L2 and L3. To meet the requirements of these policies, an isolated field barn must be in an acceptable location, but does not require the creation of a new vehicle access and track. Not only do these proposals require a new highway access and track, but also that it must be created 61 meters from the barn on top of a purpose-built embankment, along with a raised car parking and turning area, itself 22 meters from the barn. The location of the barn, therefore, does not comply with policies L1, L2, or L3. The height and length and width of the new embankment would have a significant negative impact on the appearance and character of the conservation area, the archaeological features of the strip lynchets within the fields, and the setting of the barn itself. Officers have always supported the use of barns as holiday cottages to assist the local economy where there would not be overriding harm to the special qualities of the landscape of the National Park. But the applicant has not dealt with all the issues raised when the previous application was refused. It is therefore recommended that the application be refused for the reason set out in the officer's report, plus the addition of a second reason based on the grounds that the proposed access is unacceptable on highway safety grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. I'll just wait till you've closed down the your screen.
Yes, beg your pardon.
Lovely, thank you. Now we do have a public speaker on this application. It's Ms. Kim Eastwood, the agent for the applicant. Ms. Eastwood, thank you for attending and thank you for your patience waiting this far in the meeting. So can you now unmute your microphone and make your statement, and just remind you you've got 3 minutes to make your statement to members. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members. The application before you represents a revised scheme, which was considered to address the previous reasons for refusal. The submission includes a landscape and visual impact assessment, unlike the previously refused scheme, which concludes that the restoration of the barn, access track and stone walls are demonstrated to fit into the landscape character. This conclusion has been reached by a qualified professional, yet officers still have concerns, despite not producing a rebuttal by a specialist landscape officer. It should also be noted that Natural England have no objections to the revised scheme. The revised scheme shows an access track which would follow the gap between the road and the lynchets, so there would be no disturbance in this regard. In any event, our client has an extant permission for a new agricultural access, which she has until next summer to implement. Medieval lynchets were never raised as an issue as part of that 2018 permission. The scheme will lead to the blocking up of 3 existing access points from our client's land to Silver Street. The recent speed survey result is that drivers travel at 38.5 miles per hour. If the speed had been 36 miles per hour, then the required visibility display would have only been 60 metres in each direction. At present, the scheme achieves 61 and 68 metres respectively. The scheme may be fractionally shy of the required visibility displays. However, officers have previously used their own discretion and have still approved a number of barn conversions based on their own assessments, such as the following, which is quoted from a couple of officers' reports, such as the long and straight road means the traffic will be visible, even if not to highway standards. And another quote being that whilst the road bends, rises and falls, it results in drivers travelling much slower. These schemes have been approved despite falling short of the required visibility displays, very much akin to the scheme before you today. The curtilage is defined with estate railings, contrary to the officer's report, and whilst criticised for only being 1 metre wide, in reality this is wholly adequate. We must remember the barn will only be for a 1-bedroomed holiday let. The works associated with the barn will have a neutral impact on the setting of the non-designated heritage asset, and the sensitive conversion and reuse will ensure its future, that the barn will remain and contribute towards the local economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eastwood. Do by all means stay with us for the rest of this item. I wanted to, as Cultural Heritage Champion, just make a few remarks about this application myself before I move to Mr. Good, who I know wants to speak.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman. You are not entitled to say anything in regards to what you're going to say, because You are supposed to be just chairing the meeting, not passing comment on anything other than the meeting.
As
Don't.
cultural heritage champion,
No, you are not. You are not.
I'm entitled to.
You are not permitted.
Chairman, can I
anything.
get in here, please, Chairman, as a point of order?
Yes.
Chairman, Mrs. Martin is perfectly entitled to take part in the vote as a member of the committee, even though she's chairing it, and she's perfectly entitled to speak at the start of the debate.
No, she should speak at the end of the debate, as the chairman speaks at the end, not at the beginning.
Chairman, Mr. Johnson is wrong. You're perfectly entitled to speak at the start of the debate as chairman.
Thank you, and I'm going to do so. I mean, as I say, I wanted to make a few comments and pass on a bit of further information as cultural heritage champion. I do feel, I mean, I'm not making a proposal on this, but I do feel that there are strong reasons for refusal of this application. The lynchets, which are a medieval cultivation terrace feature, in this case, our heritage officer, our senior historic environment officer, does consider them to be especially important. He says that they are arguably worthy of formal protection, that this is one of the more impressive lynchet groups within the whole of the national park, and visually similar to a group that is protected as a scheduled monument in Littondale. And he goes on to say that this kind of medieval cultivation terrace is actually very rare within the Barnes and Walls conservation area here. So I just wanted other members to be aware of that, and to point out that these lynchets, you know, they are very vulnerable to change, and the earthworks that would be required even to achieve the degree of terracing that's needed at the moment, never mind one that might help meet highway authority standards, is going to cause very significant damage. And I speak as a landscape consultant myself, a retired landscape consultant, be very widely visible in the landscape and in fact affect the integrity of that feature, not only the earthworks but also the car parking area, which is separate from the barn itself. I was particularly struck by the fact that this is not a barn that's at risk of dereliction or at risk of falling down. It's one that has been repaired through the authorities, with the authorities' own support in the past. And there's no objection to the refusal from the parish council. And I do think that that, together with the highways issues, are likely to mean that if we were to refuse this application, the refusal would be upheld at appeal. So I have had a little say there, and I'll stop at that point, and I will hand over to Mr. Good, who I know wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I must say that I'm surprised that you're allowed to speak, because in other authorities which I sit on, you wouldn't be allowed to speak until the end. But anyway, that is a decision. But just one small point you made, Chair. You said that the parish council had no objection to refusal. The parish council weren't aware of refusal when they discussed it, because they discussed it at their meeting in September. What they said was they have no objection to the plan, not no objection to refusal, which is what you just said. So let's be clear that the parish council have no objection to the plan before us. It is a difficult one, is this, because the access is the problem to it. It is a roadside barn, and as was pointed out by members in a previous application, it is definitely a roadside barn. It's described by the officers as isolated. It is, in fact, as you can see from the photographs, relatively close to Reeth School. It's within vision of the village. It's not really isolated in the form that some of the other ones we've looked at in the past. I have to say it's disappointing that the highways are so short on that little bit of the difference in the speed. If anybody knows the road, you would be hard pressed to reach 60 miles an hour. Not even young people that have just passed their license, I think, would attempt 60 miles an hour. It is very, very difficult indeed to reach anything over about 35 or 40 on that road. The business of the disturbance of the lynches, as I understand it from visiting the site, the road would be, the access road would be put in, not disturbing them. Though I can understand the concern about those. I have to say, I've spoken to a number of locals in recent weeks since this came out, and many locals aren't even aware that they're there, because you have to be fair to be at the other side of the, you don't see them from the roadside, you have to be at the other side of the river to observe them the other side before you see them. But they are important, I accept them. We don't want them disturbing. The business of the holes in the wall has been pointed out by Kim earlier. There are currently 3, I think, gaps in the wall. They'll be reduced to just 1 at the access when the access is put in. So although I agree it's difficult and it's borderline in my opinion, I think the possibility of another holiday let, given our current financial situation in Tweldale, which is very precarious, and there is need for further holiday accommodation. That's been proved by a number of people of recent years saying so. So I propose that we accept this proposal. Sorry, I propose that we accept the proposal for this property and this conversion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Good. Is there anyone that wishes to second that proposal?
Mr. Amsden.
I'm proposing seconding it.
Okay, so you're Mr. Amsden. Would you like to speak on this, Mr. Amsden?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'll still stand by what I said prior to your comments. As it has been viewed from Reeth, and most barns are on roadsides are viewed from various places. The building itself is sound. I have been to see the building, and your conservation officer said there was a lintel that was should not be removed, but when I looked at it, the lintel is actually broken, so it isn't fit for purpose in that sense. As regards the lynch shits, it is on top of the first one. It is not going down the field. It is built on the track would be built on the first one, so therefore it wouldn't affect at all. In regards to the embankment onto the road, considering most of that wall belongs to the county council as it is below road level, and any gaps that do fall, the county council has to put them back up again, and they have put 2 or 3 up by the look of it. We just passed another one where there is a track that runs to the first one we passed, so therefore we're contradicting our own statements. So there's no reason why a track should not be put into this one. It wouldn't be seen from the other side of the dale because it's on top of the lynch ship, and at certain areas there's going to be trees planted and it's going to be screened. Next to the barn is going to be a narrow path. Well, who the dickens wants to sit out on the narrow path in the first place? It's just a path to accommodate the barn. I'm just getting a little fed up of the attitude of the National Park and roadside barns. I thought years ago I went to a meeting at Broughton Hall where we were trying to get barns on roadsides or near to villages used again for local occupancy in holiday cottages. We just seem to get into a situation where willy-nilly we won't pass them, and this one actually does pass 1, 2 and 3 because it is in the area. And you also say that it can be seen from the other side of the dale. Well, most properties in this dales are seen from the other side. If that was in the Vale of York or Lincolnshire, you wouldn't see it because it's that flat. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Amsden. I can see Mr. McPherson wants to speak. I just wanted, before we move to Mr. McPherson, just to ask Mr. Bishop or Mr. Graham, had I got it wrong about the, it sounds like perhaps I did get it wrong about the parish council response. Could you just clarify that, please?
Yes, their response, Chairman, was that they had no objection to the application.
The application, okay. My apologies on that then. I've misinterpreted that.
As a point of information, Chairman, there is an approved access for agricultural vehicles 200 metres to the east, closer to Reeth. The highway requirement was that it have a gate set back 13 metres from the road, at the level of the road. We can see that this scheme does not achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Over to you, Mr. McPherson now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just to clarify the situation, I rather got the impression from the agent that there was already an extant permission in place to set up a rather similar arrangement to the one that's being proposed in this particular application. However, the report makes it clear that a previous planning application for conversion of the barn to a holiday let, including a new twin-wheeled access track from an existing gateway only 60 metres to the east of the barn, was refused in February of this year, for very similar reasons for those which are being proposed to refuse it on this occasion. I'm afraid I'm having to disagree with the speakers so far, in that policy L2 does seem to be particularly clear with relevance to this application. I'm reading from the report. They're not paginated for reasons that Mrs. Tamier has explained to me, and I accept there's a problem about pagination at the moment. But what it says is that policy L2 allows the change of use of traditional barns to the high-intensity residential use as visitor accommodation only if it is in a suitable location. The local plan provides a guide to the likely acceptability of a barn's location, and this says, this is the relevant bit, that an acceptable location for a conversion to a holiday let is one where the roadside location does not require significant improvements to the vehicle access or a new access track. And frankly, I can't consider a better example where a very significant improvement in inverted commas will need to be made to make this barn livable in and usable as a holiday let. So for me, there's a very clear breach of policy L2 here. In addition, of course, there is also the fact that the construction of this very long access track on top of the embankment is going to make a significant impact on the surrounding area. There is also the consideration relating to the lynchets, which our chairman has explained. I do pay a great deal of heed to what she says with regard to matters of historical interest and impact, because she's member champion, but as she's just mentioned, she's also a consultant in this area. So I do give that a great deal of credence and materiality. We also, in addition, of course, have the fact that there are significant highway considerations too, and that the Highway Authority is not at all happy with the present arrangements, bearing in mind the possible, not necessarily the likely, but the possible speeds of vehicles going along this roadway. To me, this is just a step too far. And I have to say that despite what Mr. Amson says, the authority does actually have an extremely good record of giving consent for roadside barns. And it's only in exceptional cases such as this one that they need to be brought to committee for consideration. Otherwise, they're usually refused, granted permission by members under their delegated powers. So I'm afraid in this case, Chair, for the various reasons I've stated, and the other reasons set out in an excellent report from Mr. Bishop, I will be voting against the proposal to approve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Anyone else wishing to speak at this point? Mr. Munday.
it's almost as though if we've got two items on the agenda here. One is the barn and the other is the car park and access road. And really, one of the things which you've really got to knock on the head is that most barn conversions which come forward to the planning authority are approved. We've approved over 150 in the last few years, and over 92% of barn conversions which come forward to us are actually agreed. So the suggestion by some members that the authority takes a negative approach to this is wrong. Here, there's no doubt in my mind, the main issue is as put out in the report, is the relation to the disproportionate amount of works required to accommodate the access. And certainly we have here a conservation area, and it's not just hills and dales that make the national park, it's barns and walls. And I think we've got to conserve those. So I too will be voting to refuse this application.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Now I see two more hands raised, and then I think we'll call it to a close. Mr. Kirkbride, first of all. Mr. Kirkbride, we can't hear you.
Sorry, my mic just didn't come when I pressed the button. I'm happy to say that Mr. Monday point that there was 150 barns being passed. I'm delighted with those figures. I'd be even more delighted if there was 151 barns were going to be passed. There's several points here. Highways. Now, highways blow hot and cold, and we know very well within the Yorkshire Dales that if we had to get full sighting for any application, we would get very, very few applications through. The highways is only a recommendation. It is not statutory that we have to go what highways say. And very, very few planning applications in this dale would go through if they had to get full sighting. The access road will be low. It will not be seen from the road. It will be levelled out. It will not be seen from the other side of the valley looking across, because it'll be level and you will be looking into a hillside, and you won't see it. It was said that it would stand out like a sore thumb. It certainly won't stand out. It won't be seen. And we seem to blow hot and cold on different applications. And with this one, I will be supporting it. The lynches, I realise, are very important, but there again, the majority will not be affected. It's just under the road where the trap's going to be, and I can't see a lot of problem with this. Fine, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkbride. Mr. Foster.
Just on consistency, we've passed a barn without any access whatsoever, or no granted access. I know it's a legal matter, but we've just done it, and now we're arguing over an access, which in actual fact will just become a new lynchet, because it's just going to be another embankment put in. I know it's modern, and we don't like modern within the parks, but the creation of this lynchet will be for the parking of cars. The road is probably built on a lynchet, if you look, because it did tend to follow the lines around the hill as they went. The lynchets have already been damaged by man, in the past thing. So, if we're going to be consistent, we've got to pass this one as we pass the other one. The access is a problem if there isn't the sight lines, but I do think that the speed on these roads aren't what highways have done, and they've just seen 60 miles an hour put the displays on that they believe to be, because I'm doubting that actually being and consider the site. So we've just got to be consistent with these things, and I just think because it is visible, it's more visible than the one at Craycourt, I get that, but there's no railway line going in front of it. So to my mind, just consistency needs to be brought to book, and one is exactly the same as the other, apart from this one is actually a roadside barn.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Foster. So we're going to move to the vote on this in a moment, but before we do so, can I just ask if our proposer, Mr. Good, would like to say anything more in response to any of those comments?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think that the views of both sides have been expressed very clearly. I don't see any point in adding to it. I just hope that members feel they're able to support my proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Good. So we're going to move to the vote on this one. Now it'll be a named vote as it's contrary to officer recommendation. So the proposal is that the application be approved. If I could hand over to you, Mrs. Tamia, to take the vote, please.
Chairman, just to interrupt at this point, do you want reasons, Chairman, because it's contrary to recommendation?
Of course, yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Have you noted things down?
The reasons I have, Chairman, from the comments from Mr. Good and Mr. Amsden are the following: that the highway safety is satisfactory, the lynchets would not be disturbed, the access track is not unduly visible, and that further holiday accommodation is needed and it would boost the economy.
Mr. Good, you happy with that summary?
Yes, yeah. They cover it. That's fine. I have nothing further to add.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mrs. Tamia, if you could take the vote now, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I could start, please, with Mr. Amsden. Are you for or against?
I'm for the application be approved.
Thank you. And Mr. Foster?
Or
Mr. Freer?
I'm going to abstain, please.
Mr. Good?
I'm for the...
Mr. Neil Heseltine?
Against.
Mrs. Hutton?
Against.
Mr. Ireton?
against.
Mr. Kirkbride?
For.
Mrs. Lancaster?
Against.
Mrs. Martin?
Against.
Mr. McPherson?
Against.
Mr. Monday? Sorry, I didn't catch you.
Sorry, against.
Thank you. Mrs. Quinn?
Against.
Mr. Swain?
Against.
So that's 4 votes in favour, 9 against and 1 abstention, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Tamia. So that motion fails. Mr. McPherson, I see you have your hand raised.
I'd like to propose that we refuse the application, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, so we need to does anyone else wish to speak on this? So we'll move straight to the vote on this. The substantive motion then is to approve the officer recommendation to refuse this application. And I'll hand over to Mrs. Tamia to take the vote.
Thank you. So everyone in favour of the motion to refuse, if you could raise your electronic hands now, please. So I have Mr. Swain, Mr. McPherson, Mrs. Lancaster, Mr. Ireton, Mrs. Martin, Mr. Monday, Mr. Neil Heseltine, Mrs. Hutton, and Mrs. Quinn. Any additions or amendments to that? No. So everyone against that motion, if you could raise your electronic hand now, please. So Mr. Foster, Mr. Good, Mr. Amsden, Mr. Kirkbride. And if I could have any abstentions, if you could raise your electronic hand now, please. So Mr. Freer abstaining. And if there's no amendments or corrections to that, that motion is passed, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So that application stands approved. Thank you very much for coming along to speak, Ms. Eastwood. And I know it's not the outcome you wanted, but I hope you agree we had a good debate about it.